The blood on her hands was still warm when Sarah Mitchell realized she would have to run, and this time there would be no coming back to the only home she had ever known in the Arizona Territory of 1882. The ranch house behind her was engulfed in flames, the crackling fire mixing with the dying screams of the men who had murdered her family 3 years prior and had finally come to finish what they started. Sarah had fought back this time, and the cost of survival was written across her body in ways that would never fade. She pressed her hand against the fresh wound on her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her own blood seeping through her fingers as she stumbled toward the barn. Her horse, a sturdy mare named Copper, waited in the darkness, and Sarah pulled herself into the saddle with the last of her strength before riding into the desert night. The town of Redemption Springs was 2 days' ride north, nestled in a valley where the Verde River cut through the red rock landscape. Sarah had heard stories about it, a place where people went to disappear, to start over, to forget. As the sun rose on her second day of travel, she could see the town materializing through the heat shimmer, a collection of wooden buildings that seemed to grow from the earth itself. She was feverish now, the wound on her shoulder infected, and she barely registered sliding from Copper's back before her knees hit the dust of Main Street. "Someone help her," a woman's voice called out, but Sarah's vision was already darkening at the edges. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments, cool cloth on her forehead, the sharp smell of whiskey and carbolic acid, hands, gentle but firm, cleaning her wounds. Sarah's eyes fluttered open to find herself in a small room with whitewashed walls and simple wooden furniture. A woman in her 50s sat beside the bed, her gray streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Easy now," the woman said, placing a hand on Sarah's good shoulder as she tried to sit up. "You have been out for 2 days. I am Martha Brennan. My husband and I run the boarding house here in Redemption Springs." Sarah's throat was dry, and when she spoke, her voice came out as a rasp. "My horse?" "Safe in our stable, fed and watered. That is a fine animal you have there." Martha poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup and held it to Sarah's lips. "You want to tell me what happened to you?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah thought about the years of running, the scars that covered her arms, her back, her ribs, the burn mark from when she was 15 and had defended herself from a drunk ranch hand, the knife wounds from the attack that killed her parents, the bullet graze from last week, the rope burns from the time she had been dragged behind a horse after trying to escape her uncle's ranch, where she had been sent after her parents died. "I survived," Sarah finally said, and something in her tone made Martha nod and ask no more questions. Recovery was slow. Sarah kept to her room for the first week, allowing her body to heal while she planned her next move. She had a small amount of money sewn into the lining of her saddlebags, enough to last a few months if she was careful. Martha brought meals and changed her bandages without prying, though Sarah could see the questions in her eyes every time she saw another scar revealed. On the 8th day, Sarah finally ventured downstairs to the boarding house's common room. It was late afternoon and the space was empty except for a man sitting near the window reading a newspaper. He looked up as she descended the stairs, and Sarah found herself meeting a pair of startling blue eyes set in a sun-weathered face. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that brushed his collar and the lean build of someone who spent his days working hard. "Afternoon," he said, tipping his head politely. "You must be the woman Martha has been tending to. I am James Cordell." "Sarah Mitchell." She hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, suddenly aware of how she must look, pale and thin, with her left arm still bound in a sling. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Mitchell." James folded his newspaper and stood. "Can I help you with something? You look like you're trying to decide if you can make it to that chair or not." Sarah bristled at the observation, but he was not wrong. "I can manage." "I am sure you can." There was no condescension in his voice, just statement of fact. But there is no shame in accepting help when it is offered. Something about the way he said it, simple and honest, made Sarah relent. She nodded, and James crossed the room to offer his arm. She took it lightly, annoyed at how much she actually did need the support, and let him guide her to one of the comfortable chairs near the fireplace. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "You're welcome." James returned to his seat, but did not pick up his newspaper. "Martha says you are a fine rider. Not many women can handle a horse like yours alone across the desert." "I have been riding since I could walk." "Ranch family?" Sarah nodded. "Was, in the southern part of the territory." James seemed to hear what she did not say. "I am sorry for your loss." They sat in silence for a while, and Sarah found it oddly comfortable. Most men either talked too much or stared too long, but James simply returned to his newspaper, giving her space while remaining present. It was only when Martha came in with a tray of coffee that Sarah learned James was the foreman of the largest ranch in the area, the Double Bar C, and that he stayed in town a few nights each week to conduct business and escape the isolation of ranch life. Over the following weeks, as Sarah continued to heal, she and James fell into an easy rhythm. He would be in town on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and they would often share meals at the boarding house or take short walks along the river when Sarah felt strong enough. James talked about the ranch, about the challenges of managing cattle in the Arizona heat, about the good men he worked with, and the difficult owner he worked for. Sarah, in turn, found herself sharing carefully edited stories of her childhood, of learning to rope and brand, of the wild beauty of the territory she had grown up in. But she never mentioned the scars, and she made sure to keep them covered. Long sleeves despite the heat. High collars. She saw the way James's eyes would sometimes linger on the rope burn visible just above her wrist, or the way his expression would tighten when he noticed how she favored her left side. But he never asked, and she was grateful for it. 6 weeks after arriving in Redemption Springs, Sarah knew she needed to find work. Her money was running low, and she refused to be a burden. Martha needed help with the boarding house, but Sarah wanted something that would keep her outdoors, that would let her work with horses. When she mentioned this to James one evening, he was quiet for a long moment. "The Double Bar C could use a horsebreaker," he finally said. "We have got a string of green horses that need training, and the man who was handling it left last month. The owner, Mr. Callahan, has been pushing me to find someone, but most of the men around here are better with cattle than horses." "I can break horses," Sarah said immediately. "I am good at it." "I do not doubt that." James met her eyes. "But I need to be honest with you, Sarah. Ranch work is hard, and you would be the only woman in the bunkhouse area. Some of the men might not take kindly to it." "I have dealt with difficult men before." Something dark flickered across James's face, and Sarah realized he was looking at the scar just visible above her collar. "I'm sure you have," he said quietly. "But I will make it clear to everyone that you are under my protection. Anyone who gives you trouble will answer to me." The fierceness in his voice sent an unexpected warmth through Sarah's chest. "I do not need protecting." "Maybe not, but you will have it anyway." Sarah started work at the Double Bar C the following Monday. The ranch was sprawling, with thousands of acres of grazing land stretching toward the mountains in the distance. The main house was an imposing 2-story structure where Mr. Callahan lived with his wife and 3 daughters, while the bunkhouse and work buildings formed a separate compound a quarter-mile away. James had been right about the men's reactions. Some were curious, others openly hostile, but one hard look from James was enough to silence any complaints. The work was exactly what Sarah needed. The horses were young and spirited, Mustangs that had been rounded up from the wild herds and needed to learn to accept saddle and rider. Sarah approached each one with patience and firmness, spending hours in the round pen earning their trust before ever attempting to ride. She had a gift for it, an intuitive understanding of horse psychology that James had rarely seen. "You are a natural," he told her one afternoon, watching as she worked with a particularly stubborn bay gelding. "That horse tried to kill 3 different men, but he is eating out of your hand." Sarah smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed her entire face. Horses are honest. They do not pretend to be something they are not. You just have to learn their language. I wish people were more like that. Some are. Sarah glanced at him, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the growing connection neither had put into words. That night, the ranch hands gathered around a fire outside the bunkhouse, passing a bottle of whiskey and trading stories. Sarah usually avoided these gatherings, but James had specifically asked her to come, and she found herself sitting on a log near the flames, listening to the men talk. The conversation turned to scars and close calls, each man trying to top the last with tales of their injuries and narrow escapes. "What about you, Sarah?" called out a young cowboy named Tommy, his words slightly slurred. "You got any good scar stories?" The group fell silent. Sarah felt every eye turn toward her, and she saw James tense, ready to intervene. But something in her had shifted in the months since arriving in Redemption Springs. She was tired of hiding, tired of shame for things that had been done to her rather than by her. "I have got plenty," she said evenly, "but they're not the kind of stories you tell around a campfire." "Why not?" Tommy pressed, too drunk to read the room. "Because some scars come from surviving things that should not happen to anyone." Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. "And those are not entertainment." Tommy had the grace to look ashamed, and the conversation moved on. But later, as the gathering broke up and men headed to their bunks, James walked with Sarah toward the small cabin that had been set aside for her use. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said. "I know those gatherings are not your favorite." "It was fine." Tommy was out of line. He was drunk and thoughtless. There is a difference between that and cruel. Sarah paused at the door to her cabin, turning to face James in the moonlight. "You do not have to keep watching out for me, you know. I have been taking care of myself for a long time." "I know you have." James took a step closer, and Sarah's breath caught. "But maybe you do not always have to. Maybe it is okay to let someone stand beside you instead of always standing alone." "James," Sarah started, but she did not know how to finish. How could she explain that letting someone close meant revealing all the broken parts of herself? That the scars on her body were nothing compared to the ones no one could see? "I am not asking for anything," James said gently. "I just want you to know that I am here, whenever you are ready." He left before she could respond, and Sarah stood in the doorway of her cabin for a long time, staring at the stars and wondering what it would be like to trust someone enough to let them truly see her. Summer deepened into fall, and the work on the ranch continued. Sarah had proven herself invaluable, not just with the horses, but in other ways too. She could ride fence line as well as any man, doctor sick cattle, and even help with the fall roundup. Mr. Callahan, a stern man in his 50s who rarely gave praise, had told James that hiring Sarah was the best decision he had made all year. Sarah's friendship with James had deepened as well, though they both danced around the obvious attraction between them. They would ride out together to check on the herds, sharing comfortable silences punctuated by easy conversation. James had a dry sense of humor that surprised Sarah into laughter, and she found herself looking forward to the days they worked together. But there were also moments of tension, times when James's hand would brush against hers and they would both freeze, caught between wanting to move closer and being afraid of what that might mean. Sarah could feel the questions James did not ask, could see the concern in his eyes when he caught glimpses of scars she had not meant to reveal. She knew he was waiting for her to trust him enough to share her story, but the words remained locked inside her chest, too heavy and sharp to release. The breaking point came in late October. Sarah was working with a young mare in the round pen when the horse spooked at a snake, rearing and striking out with her hooves. Sarah dodged, but not fast enough, and one hoof caught her across the ribs, sending her crashing into the fence. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs, and she heard wood splinter as she fell. James was there in seconds, having seen the accident from across the yard. "Sarah, do not move. Let me check you." "I am fine," Sarah gasped, trying to push herself up. Pain lanced through her side, and she could not quite suppress a groan. "You are not fine. You could have broken ribs." James crouched beside her, his face pale. "Let me help you to the house." "No." Sarah shook her head stubbornly. "Just help me to my cabin. I need to clean up." James looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. He helped her stand, supporting most of her weight as they made the slow walk to her cabin. Once inside, he eased her onto the narrow bed and knelt to remove her boots. "Let me see," he said, reaching for the buttons of her shirt. "No." Sarah's hand shot out to stop him, despite the pain it caused. "I can do it myself." "Sarah, you can barely breathe. You need to let me check if anything is broken." "I said no." The words came out sharper than she intended, born of panic and pain. James sat back on his heels, his expression a mixture of frustration and hurt. "Why will you not let me help you? Do you really trust me so little?" "It is not about trust." "Then what is it about?" James's voice rose slightly. "I've been dancing around this for months, giving you space, waiting for you to let me in, but you keep pushing me away every time I get close. If you do not want me here, just say so." "That is not it." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, and she hated herself for the weakness. "You do not understand." "Then help me understand." The words burst out of Sarah before she could stop them. "Because nobody wants a woman with this many scars." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah turned her face away, unable to look at James, unable to see the pity or disgust she was certain would be in his eyes. "Every inch of me is marked, James, burned and cut and broken. I am not whole, and I have not been whole for a long time, and I cannot stand the thought of you looking at me and seeing something damaged beyond repair." She heard James move, felt the bed dip as he sat beside her. His hand, gentle and warm, cupped her chin and turned her face toward him. His eyes were wet with unshed tears. "Can I show you something?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. James stood and began unbuttoning his own shirt, shrugging it off to reveal a chest and stomach crisscrossed with scars. A long puckered line ran from his collarbone to his hip. Smaller marks dotted his ribs. A burn scar covered his left shoulder. "Apache raid when I was 19, James said, tracing the long scar. "These were from a knife fight in Tucson when I was 22 and stupid enough to think I could take on 3 men. This burn was from a branding iron accident last year." He paused, his voice dropping. "And these—" He pointed to a series of thin, parallel scars on his back that Sarah could just see as he turned. "These were from my father, who thought the best way to raise a son was with a belt and a heavy hand." "James," Sarah whispered, her heart breaking for the boy he had been. "I am not telling you this to compare pain," James said, sitting beside her again. "I am telling you this because I understand. I know what it is like to carry marks that tell stories you wish you could forget. And I need you to hear me when I say this, Sarah. Those scars do not make you less. They make you who you are. They are proof that you survived, that you fought, that you are still here despite everything that tried to break you." "But they are so ugly," Sarah said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "They are part of you, and there is nothing about you that I find ugly." James reached out slowly, giving Sarah time to pull away. When she did not, he carefully began unbuttoning her shirt, his movements respectful and tender. "Will you let me see? All of you?" Sarah's hands trembled as she nodded. James helped her out of her shirt, and then her undershirt, until she sat before him in only her work pants and bindings. She watched his face as he took in the full extent of the damage. The rope burns that circled her wrists and upper arms, the knife scars scattered across her ribs and back, the burn mark on her left side, roughly the shape of a hand, the bullet graze along her collarbone, the fresh bruise from the horse already darkening to purple. James's jaw tightened and his hands curled into fists, but his eyes, when he met hers, were not filled with pity or disgust. They blazed with fury at what had been done to her, and underneath that something that looked like reverence. "Can I touch you?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes." James's fingers were feather-light as they traced the rope burn on her right wrist. "Who did this?" "Men who worked for my uncle. After my parents died, I was sent to live with him. He ran a ranch, and he had ideas about how a young woman should behave. When I fought back, his men made sure I understood my place." James's finger moved to the knife scar along her ribs. And this? The night my uncle died, his men came to the ranch where I had been working, said I owed them for helping to arrange his death. I did not. I had nothing to do with it, but they did not care about the truth. Sarah's voice was steady now, detached, as if she were telling someone else's story. They wanted to hurt me, to punish me for being alive when he was not. I fought back. I killed 2 of them. The others ran. Good, James said fiercely. I am glad you fought back. I am glad you survived. His finger traced the burn scar, and Sarah flinched at the memory. That was the first one. I was 15. A ranch hand got drunk and came into the barn where I was sleeping. He pressed a heated horseshoe against me when I tried to scream. I managed to stab him with a pitchfork before he could do worse. Sarah, James breathed, and now there were tears on his face too. The bullet graze was from 3 months ago. My uncle's men finally found me at the ranch where I had been living. They set fire to the house, killed the family who had taken me in. I barely escaped. Sarah met his eyes. That is who I am, James. I am a woman who has been running and fighting her whole life. I am covered in proof of every terrible thing that has happened to me. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants all this broken history. I want it. James's voice was firm, absolute. I want all of it. Every scar, every story, every broken piece. I want them all because they are part of you. And I want you, Sarah Mitchell. I have wanted you since the day I first saw you come down those stairs at Martha's boarding house. I have wanted you every moment since, and nothing you have just told me changes that. If anything, it makes me want you more because now I know just how strong you are, how brave, how absolutely remarkable. James, Sarah's voice broke on his name. I love you, James said simply. I love your strength and your stubbornness. I love the way you talk to horses and the way you laugh when you think no one is listening. I love that you refuse to let the world make you small or scared. And I love these scars because they are proof that you are still here, still fighting, still alive. They are beautiful because you are beautiful, and they are part of you. He leaned forward, and Sarah held her breath as his lips pressed gently against the rope burn on her wrist. Then he kissed the knife scar on her ribs, the burn mark on her side, the bullet graze. Each scar received the same tender attention, James's lips tracing the map of her survival with a reverence that made Sarah's chest ache. I want them all, James whispered against her skin. Every single one. Will you let me have them? Will you let me have you? Sarah's answer was to cup his face in her hands and kiss him with all the desperate longing she had been holding back for months. James kissed her back with equal fervor, his arms coming around her carefully, mindful of her injuries. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah rested her forehead against his. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have loved you since you offered me your arm that first day, since you have given me space to heal and time to trust. I am just so scared, James. What if something happens? What if those men come back? What if I lose you too? You will not lose me. James pulled back enough to look into her eyes. And if those men come back, they will have to go through me to get to you. But Sarah, you cannot live your whole life running and afraid. At some point, you have to decide to stand and fight for something good. Will you stand with me? Will you let me stand with you? Yes, Sarah said, and it felt like a vow. Yes, I will. They sat together in the gathering darkness, holding each other, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt something that might have been hope beginning to unfold in her chest. James carefully wrapped her ribs, determined that at least 2 were cracked but not broken, and insisted she rest for a few days. He stayed with her that night, both of them fully clothed, just holding each other in the narrow bed. Sarah fell asleep listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling safer than she had in years. The next morning, James had to return to work, but he stopped by at lunch and again in the evening. The other ranch hands had noticed the shift between them, and while there were a few knowing smiles, no one dared make any crude comments. The protection James offered Sarah had been unspoken before, but now it was obvious to everyone that she was his, and he was hers. Sarah's ribs healed slowly, and James was ruthless about making sure she did not overdo it. 2 weeks after the accident, they rode out together to check on a herd in the northern pasture. It was a clear November day, crisp and bright, with the kind of sky that seemed to stretch on forever. They stopped near a creek to let the horses drink, and James helped Sarah dismount, his hands lingering on her waist. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the future, about what comes next." "What comes next?" Sarah repeated, her heart beginning to race. "I want to marry you, Sarah. I want to build a life with you. I have been saving money for years, and I have enough now to buy land. Not as much as the Double Bar Sea, but enough for a good start. We could have our own ranch, raise horses together, make something that is ours." James took her hands in his. "But I know you have been running for a long time, and I do not want you to feel trapped. So I need to know if that is what you want too, or if you need to keep moving." Sarah felt tears well up again, but these were different from the tears she had shed before. These were born of joy, of the overwhelming realization that she had found something she had thought was lost to her forever, a future. "I have been running because I had nothing to stay for," Sarah said, "but I have something now. I have you. And yes, James Cordell, I will marry you. I will build a life with you. I want to stop running and start living." James kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Sarah kissed him back with all the love and hope that was blooming inside her. When they finally broke apart, both smiling, James reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "She gave it to me before she died and told me to save it for someone worth marrying. I cannot think of anyone more worthy than you." Sarah let him slip the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. They stood by the creek holding each other, making plans and promises until the sun began to sink toward the horizon, and they had to ride back to the ranch. They were married a month later in Redemption Springs, with Martha and her husband as witnesses and most of the town in attendance. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Martha had helped her sew, and James wore his best suit, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face as they exchanged vows. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed Sarah with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance dabbed at their eyes. The celebration afterward was loud and joyful, with music and dancing and more food than Sarah had seen in years. She found herself pulled into dances with various ranch hands and townspeople, all offering congratulations and well wishes. But her favorite dance was the last one, when James took her hand and led her outside under the stars. "Happy, Mrs. Cordell?" he asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," Sarah admitted. They had rented a room at the boarding house for their wedding night, and Martha had left flowers and a bottle of wine waiting for them. Once inside, alone at last, James turned to Sarah with an expression so full of love that it took her breath away. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he promised. "I could never regret you," Sarah said, reaching up to cup his face. "You saved me, James. Not from those men or from the running, but from believing I did not deserve to be loved." "You deserve everything good in this world," James said fiercely, "and I am going to do my best to give it to you." They made love that night with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes, James kissing every scar again, whispering words of love and devotion against Sarah's skin until she believed them in the marrow of her bones. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about the ranch they would build, the horses they would raise, the life they would create together. The following spring, James made good on his promise. He had found a perfect piece of land about 20 miles from Redemption Springs, a valley with good water and grazing, backed by protective hills. He bought it with his savings and the money Sarah had managed to hold on to, and they began building their dream. The first year was hard. They lived in a small cabin James built with his own hands, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, while they worked to build corrals, a barn, and fences. Sarah was pregnant by the end of summer, and James fretted over her constantly, trying to make her rest even as she insisted on continuing to work. "I am having a baby, not dying," Sarah told him one afternoon when he tried to take a hammer from her hands. "I am perfectly capable of helping build our barn." "I know you are capable," James said, "but I'm allowed to worry about you." "You can worry all you want, as long as you do not try to stop me from living my life." Their son was born in March of 1884, delivered by Martha in the new house James had managed to finish just in time. It was a difficult birth, and there were hours when James thought he might lose both Sarah and the baby. But Sarah was as strong as always, fighting through the pain with the same determination she brought to everything else. When Martha finally placed the baby in her arms, Sarah looked down at the tiny red-faced boy and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "You are safe now. You are loved." They named him Thomas James Cordell, and James proved to be as devoted a father as he was a husband. He would walk the floor with Thomas at night when the baby cried, sing him silly songs, and stare at him with such wonder that Sarah would find herself falling in love with James all over again. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Sarah's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and people came from all over the territory to have her work with their animals. James managed the business side of things, breeding and selling stock, while also taking on work as a foreman for other ranches when they needed the extra income. It was hard work, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and sweat. Thomas was 2 when Sarah realized she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter was born in October of 1886 on a cool morning with the first hint of winter in the air. They named her Grace, for the grace Sarah felt had been granted to her in this life she had never expected to have. The children grew up strong and wild, as at home on horseback as they were on foot. Thomas had his father's blue eyes and his mother's way with horses, while Grace had Sarah's dark hair and James's steady temperament. They worked alongside their parents from a young age, learning to rope and ride, to doctor cattle, to understand the rhythms of ranch life. But Sarah and James made sure their children knew more than just work. They taught them to read and write using books ordered from back east. They told them stories, both the sanitized versions of their own pasts and the tall tales of the West. Most importantly, they taught them about kindness, about standing up for what was right, about protecting those who could not protect themselves. On a warm evening in the summer of 1891, Sarah sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching James teach 7-year-old Thomas and 4-year-old Grace to rope a practice dummy. The house was bigger now, with 4 bedrooms and a real parlor, nothing fancy but comfortable and solid. Their herd had grown to over 100 head, and they had 3 ranch hands who worked for them full-time. The ranch, which they had named the Scarred Heart, had become one of the most respected in the territory. "Mama, did you see me?" Grace called out, having successfully roped the dummy on her 3rd try. "I got it." "I saw a baby girl," Sarah called back. "You are getting good at that." James looked over at Sarah and winked, and the smile he gave her still made her heart skip after 9 years of marriage. Later, after the children were in bed, they sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Sarah asked, leaning against James's shoulder. "If I had ridden past Redemption Springs, or if you had not been at the boarding house that day?" "Sometimes," James admitted. "But then I remember that everything that happened, good and bad, led us to this moment. And I would not change this for anything. Even the scars. Especially the scars." James tilted her face up to kiss her gently. "They brought you to me. They made you who you are. I told you once that I wanted them all, and I meant it. I will always mean it." Sarah kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. The girl who had ridden into Redemption Springs 9 years ago, broken and bleeding and certain she had no future, would never have believed she could have this. A husband who loved her completely, children who were her joy, a home that was truly hers. But that girl had been wrong about so many things. She had been wrong about being too damaged to love, wrong about being unworthy of happiness, wrong about having to face the world alone. The scars were still there, of course, still marking her body with their stories. But now, when James traced them in the privacy of their bedroom, when her children asked about them with innocent curiosity, Sarah no longer felt shame. The scars were part of her history, proof of her survival, badges of honor that said she had fought and won the right to be here, to live, to love. 3 more children came in the following years, another son, Daniel, born in 1893, and twin daughters, Emma and Lily, born in 1896. The ranch house expanded again, filled with the noise and chaos and joy of a large family. Sarah had never imagined herself as a mother, but she took to it with the same fierce devotion she brought to everything else. She taught her daughters to be strong and independent, to never let anyone make them feel less than they were. She taught her sons to be gentle and respectful, to understand that true strength came from kindness and integrity. James was her partner in all of it, sharing the work and the worry and the wonder of raising 5 children while running a ranch. There were hard times, of course, years when drought threatened their herd, times when illness swept through the family, moments of fear and frustration and doubt. But they faced everything together, James and Sarah, side by side as they had promised they would be. On their 20th anniversary in 1903, James arranged for Martha to watch the children so he could take Sarah back to Redemption Springs. They stayed in the same room at the boarding house where they had spent their wedding night, and Martha, now in her 70s but still spry, fussed over them like they were newlyweds. "Look at you two," Martha said, beaming at them over dinner. "Still so in love after all these years. You have made a beautiful life together." "We have been blessed," Sarah agreed, squeezing James's hand. That night, lying in the narrow bed that had once seemed so spacious, Sarah and James talked about their life, about their children, about the future that still stretched ahead of them. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked, "taking on a woman with as much history as I had?" James pulled her closer, his hand tracing familiar patterns on her back, following scars he had long since memorized. "Never. Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Cordell. You and our children, the life we have built together. It is more than I ever dreamed of having." "I love you," Sarah whispered against his chest. "I love you so much it still surprises me sometimes." "Good," James said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I plan to keep surprising you for the next 20 years and the 20 after that, and however many more we get." They made love that night with the same passion and tenderness they had brought to their wedding night, proving that time and children and hard work had not dimmed their desire for each other. Afterwards, Sarah lay awake for a while, listening to James's steady breathing, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the girl she had been, running through the desert night, convinced she had nothing left to lose. She thought about the moment she had first met James, how his simple kindness had begun to thaw something frozen inside her. She thought about the night she had finally let him see all of her, scars and all, and how he had loved her not in spite of them, but because of them, because they were part of her story. Most of all, she thought about the words that had changed her life. "I want them all." Those 4 words had given her permission to believe she could be loved completely, just as she was, broken pieces and all. And James had proven the truth of those words every day since, in 1,000 small ways and a few very large ones. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. Martha passed away peacefully in 1905, leaving Sarah grieving for the woman who had been like a mother to her. Thomas, their eldest, married a teacher from town in 1906 and took over managing most of the ranch operations, proving himself every bit as capable as his parents. Grace, headstrong and independent, announced at 18 that she wanted to train horses professionally, and Sarah and James supported her dream, even when others in the territory thought it scandalous for a young woman to be in such business. Daniel showed an aptitude for numbers and business, and James began teaching him the financial side of ranching. The twins, Emma and Lily, were inseparable and shared a love of books and learning. Sarah and James scraped together money to send them to a finishing school in Tucson, wanting their daughters to have opportunities they had never had. By 1910, Sarah and James were in their early 50s, their hair showing gray, their bodies marked by years of hard work. The ranch was thriving, run mostly by Thomas and a crew of trusted hands, allowing Sarah and James to slow down a bit. They took long rides together, just the two of them, exploring the land they had claimed as their own. They spent evenings on the porch, watching sunsets and talking about everything and nothing. Thomas and his wife presented them with their first grandchild in 1911, a little girl they named Sarah after her grandmother. When Sarah held her namesake for the first time, she wept, overwhelmed by the realization that this tiny baby represented a future she had fought so hard to claim. This child would grow up knowing safety and love, would never have to run or hide or be afraid in the way Sarah once had been. "Look what we made," James whispered, standing beside Sarah as she rocked their granddaughter. "Not just this moment, but everything that led to it. You did that, Sarah. You survived everything that tried to break you, and you built this beautiful life." "We built it," Sarah corrected, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. "Together. I could not have done any of this without you." "Sure you could have," James said gently. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. But I am grateful every day that you let me be beside you, that you let me share this journey." More grandchildren came in the following years. Grace married a horse rancher from New Mexico in 1913, and they settled nearby, close enough for frequent visits. Daniel took over the financial management of the ranch entirely, showing a gift for investment that helped the scarred heart prosper even during difficult economic times. The twins both married, Emma to a doctor in Tucson and Lily to a lawyer in Phoenix, but they visited often, bringing their own children to run wild on the ranch where their mother had grown up. In 1922, on a warm spring evening much like the one when they had first confessed their love, Sarah and James celebrated their 40th anniversary. The whole family gathered at the ranch, 3 generations filling the house and spilling out onto the land. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories told and memories shared. As the sun began to set, Thomas called for everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," he said, raising his glass, "to my parents who built this ranch from nothing but love and determination, who taught us what it means to fight for what matters, to stand by the people you love, to never give up no matter how hard things get. You have given us the greatest gift possible, a family rooted in love and respect. Happy anniversary, Mama and Papa. May you have 40 more years together." "Here, here," echoed around the gathering, and Sarah found herself crying yet again, overcome by the beauty of this moment of being surrounded by so much love. Later, when the guests had gone home and the children and grandchildren were settled in various rooms of the expanded house, Sarah and James walked out to the hill overlooking their ranch. The moon was full, casting silver light over the land they had claimed, and Sarah could see the dark shapes of horses grazing peacefully in the pasture. 40 years, Sarah said wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I rode into Redemption Springs. Other times it feels like that frightened girl was someone else entirely." "She was brave," James said, "that girl. She survived impossible things and kept going. She made it to Redemption Springs and met a lonely cowboy who fell in love with her the moment he saw her come down those stairs. He changed her life," Sarah said softly. "That lonely cowboy. He saw past the scars to the woman underneath. He loved her when she did not think she was worth loving. He gave her a home and a family and a reason to stop running." "She gave him everything that mattered," James replied. "She gave him love and children and purpose. She made him better than he ever could have been alone." They stood together, looking out over the life they had built, and Sarah thought about the words that had started it all. Nobody wants a woman with this many scars, she had said, so certain of her unworthiness. I want them all, James had replied, and he had meant it. He had wanted her scars, her history, her broken places. He had wanted all of her, and he had loved all of her every day for 40 years. The scars were still there, faded now with time, but never truly gone. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, James would still trace them, his touch familiar and reverent. And Sarah would think about how strange it was that the things she had once been most ashamed of had become part of her greatest love story. The scars had not kept her from happiness. In a way, they had led her to it, had brought her to Redemption Springs and to James, and to this life that was more than she ever could have imagined. "What are you thinking?" James asked, as he had so many times over the years. "That I am grateful," Sarah said simply, "for every scar, every moment of pain, every mile I ran, because it all led me here, to you, to this. And I would not change a single moment if it meant losing what we have." James kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that spoke of 40 years of marriage and love that had only deepened with time. When they finally pulled apart, both smiling, Sarah took his hand, and they walked back toward the house, toward their family, toward the life they had fought so hard to build and protect. The years that followed were gentler, marked by the slowing rhythm of age and the joy of watching grandchildren grow. Sarah and James passed the ranch officially to Thomas in 1925. Though they continued to live in the house and help out when they could, they spent their days doing the things they loved, riding together, working with young horses, sitting on the porch, and watching the sun set over land they had claimed as their own. James's health began to fail in 1928, his heart growing weak, and Sarah became his devoted caretaker, returning all the tenderness and care he had shown her over their life together. On a cool October evening, surrounded by his children and grandchildren with Sarah holding his hand, James Cordell passed peacefully away. His last words were, "I love you, all of you, every beautiful part." Sarah grieved deeply, but not hopelessly. She knew she had been blessed beyond measure to have had 46 years with a man who had loved her so completely. She wore his grandmother's ring and the wedding band he had placed on her finger. She kept the small cabin where they had started their life together as a kind of shrine to their early days. She lived another 15 years, long enough to see great-grandchildren born, to watch the scarred heart continue to thrive under Thomas's management, to know that the family she and James had created would continue long after she was gone. She was still sharp and strong at 84, still able to sit a horse, and still fierce in her love for her family. On a spring morning in 1943, Sarah woke feeling different, lighter somehow. She rose and dressed, then walked out to the hill where she and James had stood on their 40th anniversary. She could feel him beside her somehow, his presence as real as it had been in life. "I am ready," she whispered to the morning air. "I am ready to come home to you." They found her there later that day, sitting peacefully beneath the old oak tree, a smile on her face. In her lap was a letter she had written the night before, addressed to her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In it, she told them the full story of her scars, of the pain and fear and running that had defined her early life. But more than that, she told them about James, about the cowboy who had seen past her scars to the woman she really was, who had loved her completely and taught her that being broken did not mean being unworthy of love. "Never be ashamed of your scars," she wrote. "They are proof that you survived, that you fought, that you are still here. And somewhere out there is someone who will trace each one and say, 'I want them all.' Wait for that person. Do not settle for anything less than someone who loves every part of you, scars and all. That is the greatest gift your grandfather gave me, and it is the gift I wish for all of you." They buried Sarah beside James on the hill overlooking the Scarred Heart Ranch. and the whole territory seemed to come out for her funeral. People spoke of her skill with horses, her strength, her kindness, her fierce devotion to family, but Thomas in his eulogy spoke of something else. "My mother taught me that love is not about perfection," he said. "It is about seeing someone completely, all their broken places and battle scars, and choosing to love them anyway. She and my father showed us what that looked like every single day of their lives together. They built this ranch on that kind of love, raised us in it, and now it is our job to carry it forward. To love fiercely, to forgive freely, to never let shame or fear keep us from reaching for happiness. That is their legacy, and it is the greatest gift they could have given us." Years later, the Scarred Heart Ranch still stood, passed down through generations, its name a reminder of Sarah Mitchell Cordell and the cowboy who had loved her. Her story was told and retold, becoming part of family legend, but always with the same ending: that true love means seeing every scar, every wound, every broken place, and saying without hesitation, "I want them all." And somewhere in the Arizona territory, under the vast western sky, two souls rested side by side, their scars finally healed, their love eternal. Proof that even the most broken among us can find home in the arms of someone who sees us truly and loves us completely. Their story was one of survival and second chances, of learning to trust again, of building something beautiful from pain. It was a story that deserved to be remembered, a testament to the transformative power of love that asks for nothing but offers everything. The land they claimed together continued to thrive, generation after generation, each one carrying forward the lessons Sarah and James had taught. That strength comes in many forms, that scars are nothing to be ashamed of, and that the bravest thing you can ever do is let someone love all of you, even the parts you think are too broken to be loved.